we're just going to read quickly from this book. It's called Egyptian Visits to America. All right, so remember, ancient Egypt was in America, so they're seeing it in reverse. They're finding all these similarities to ancient Egypt. That's because it was in America. So that's the hijack with that. You guys already know, especially those who have been following me for a while. So again, Egyptian visits to America, some curious evidence discovered by O. Louis Tice. This is from 1922. And showing this stela here, this Maya monument, obelisk stela. As I have recently made a remarkable discovery of general interest, I take pleasure in making a preliminary announcement. Egypt and Yucatan were in close communication long before our era. From several indications, it appears that the Egyptians visited America about 3000 BC, and also that they established a colony. In this brief article, the evidence is brought out in the following order. The Egyptians knew of the existence of the American continent. They possessed vessels able to cross the Atlantic. The legends of the Maya Indians assert that their culture came to them across the ocean from the east. The ruins in Yucatan resemble the early Egyptian architecture. A large statue discovered in Mexico in 1839 is apparently of Egyptian design. The ancient Mayas greatly resembled the Egyptians in both physique and character. The language of the modern Maya Indians contains several hundred recognizable Egyptian words. The hieroglyphic alphabet of the ancient Mayas, as crudely recorded by Diego de Landa in 1565, contained at least 12 letters expressing the same sound for the same thought as the Egyptian. A more careful study of both alphabets shows the certain identity of several letters. It is even possible to read a few words of the hitherto undecipherable Mayan hieroglyphics by spelling them out directly in Egyptian. Alright, sort of like what Lepla-Jones did. The philosopher Plato in his story of the lost Atlantis mentions the fact that an Egyptian priest told Solon of the existence of America. Alright, of the existence of America. When they're talking about Atlantis, they meant America, it's telling you right here. In those days, the Atlantic was navigable. For this sea, which within the Straits of Heracles is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but that other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a continent. The Egyptians had many vessels of considerable size, though not particularly seaworthy. Senefru, a near predecessor of Cheops, who built the Great Pyramid, is said to have had a vessel of great length on the Nile over 2,000 years before the time of the Greeks. Alright, so remember, Dr. Hijack, ancient Egypt was over here. Many of the Egyptian ships of 3000 BC were large and of better lines than the tiny caravels of Columbus. The Pinta was about of only 50 tons and the Nina 40 tons, and they carried only 18 men apiece. The Egyptian vessels were not only longer, but were often equipped with special oars as well as sails. They could be helped along by the occasional rowing of 30 to 40 men. On war vessels, even 50 to 60 men. There is a steady trade wind that blows from Canary Islands to the West Indies from July to September, and a steady current in the same direction besides. All right, so, that's the hijack. Again, we've done the videos. We've shown how it's 4 times harder coming from that side over to this side. The currents are stronger, the winds are stronger, going from here over to Europe, over to Africa. This part of the Atlantic Ocean is less stormy than the Mediterranean Sea. Columbus made the trip in 5 weeks, and the Egyptians, if they tried, were undoubtedly able to make it in less. All right, so again, they're seeing it in reverse. So just remember that this is what I was talking about. The Egyptians frequently sailed along the coast of the Mediterranean and occasionally visited countries now unknown. Although their ancient names such as Maha, Au, Mahi, and others are mentioned on the monuments, they were relatively more of a seafaring people during the Old Empire than later, when their center of population had moved further inland. When the Spaniards first settled in Mexico, the Maya Indians of Yucatan told them that, according to their ancient traditions, their own ancestors had come across the ocean from the east and the west very long ago. According to their legends, Itzamna, or Samna, their rain god and founder of their civilization, usually represented as a feathered serpent, was a child of a divinity named Hunapku, and had come to them from across the sea. But neither the Indians nor the Spaniards realized at the time that the long-vanished race in Egypt had also originally worshipped a rain god, represented as a plum serpent and called the child of Hanebu. which is merely an extremely old name for the Mediterranean Sea. All right, again, ancient Egypt was here, that's why. The ruins in Yucatan. The Spaniards were greatly impressed with the wonderful cities and striking monuments in Mexico, and all their historians repeatedly mention the fine buildings and remarkable temples. Unfortunately, the Indian civilization was retrograding at the time. Several large cities were in ruins, and those containing the finest buildings had evidently been crumbling for several hundred years at the time of the Spanish conquest. The type of architecture somewhat resembled the ancient Egyptians. The important buildings were usually constructed of cut stone or of rubble masonry faced with stone and were generally rectangular in outline and massive in effect. There were also many pyramids, some of them very large, though naturally less expensive in construction than the Egyptian, usually built of earth and rock with a facing of cut stone. A few, however, were built of solid brick and a few in step form, as were the early Egyptian. The early Egyptians, right? The early, but not the later Egyptians. The early built like the Mayas. That's because they were from here. Mayan temples and altars were frequently erected on the tops of truncated pyramids. The buildings were often elaborately and beautifully decorated, the style sometimes resembling the Egyptian, sometimes showing what may be an Asiatic influence, and in more recent ruins tending to the bizarre and grotesque. Again, America's a true old world. They resemble us. The statue found at Palenque. A few of the statues and paintings are Egyptian in type. The large statue discovered by Mr. John L. Stevens at Palenque, Yucatan in 1839 is quite in the Egyptian style. It is undoubtedly very old, yet may be a copy of a still older original. I recognize the device in the figure's right hand as the conventional Egyptian representation of a trot board called men, the special personal mark of King Mene, who founded the Empire of Egypt. You guys hear that? By joining the upper and lower kingdoms about 3500 BC, or possibly earlier. He was called Aha or Ahu by the Egyptian people, and Ahau, like Kurimeo Ahau, is even now the Mayan Indian word for king. All right, you see, it's the same because ancient Egypt was here, guys, and the king's left hand is a staff of authority, such as was frequently used in Egypt instead of a scepter. The headdress, although extreme in size, is Egyptian in type. It represents the khas or crown of foreign lands, often associated with King Mene. He is portrayed as stocky and broad-shouldered with a short, straight nose, firm jaw, and broad forehead, known by Egyptologists to have been characteristic of the early rulers of Egypt. Below the figure is a frame or cartouche such as was ordinarily employed in Egypt to surround the king's name. On the left is a sign which may either be read as the Mayan numeral 8 or as the Egyptian sign for land, set up vertically. All right, and this is what they're talking about. And again, they found this in America. Remember, they're saying this is clearly Egyptian style, but they're seeing it in reverse, okay? We're going to look at the whole statue here. Again, they found this in Palenque. Below the cartouche are two cups, a common ornament in Mayan carving, but also an Egyptian sign for bowls of incense. In other words, reverence towards the king. Considered as a whole, the design of this statue certainly seems to be of Egyptian origin. All right, it has to be Egyptian, yet there's no proof of them coming. This is straight Maya. They're trying to reclassify it into Egyptian and say somebody came from another part of the world and made it over here. Resemblance of Mayas and Egyptians. Physically, the early Mayans greatly resembled the ancient Egyptians, particularly of the middle and lower classes. Both races were a little under average modern height, broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, fairly muscular, and of a distinctly reddish-brown color. Copper-colored tribes of America, slightly more red than the average North American Indian. They ordinarily had rather long, somewhat curved noses, slightly receding chins, and a sloping forehead. All right, so dodge the hijack with this part because, I believe the Mayas had many different phenotypes and different types of hair and all that. But let's see what they're saying here. It says their heads usually protruded just a little in back, generally above the center, and they had long black sometimes wavy hair. There you go. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes wavy, sometimes different types of hair, which the women wore in elaborate low coiffures. Talking about braids. Both races had the same characteristic accent, giving D and T about the same sound, and pronouncing R entirely without rolling it, so that they used the same letter indiscriminately for either L or R. They were generally healthy and thrived in a warm climate, wore scant clothing, were fond of bathing, liked to color their bodies to increase the naturally reddish tint, and were fond of perfume. All right? That's because this is all happening in here, the true old world. Both races were normally industrious and not warlike, and both had a talent for intensive agriculture, fine architecture, and the conservation of water. They were very religious and remarkably superstitious, and by nature obedient to their priests and rulers. They were greatly interested in astronomy, in which their sages could make surprisingly accurate computations, and both races originally used a year of 360 days, with 5 additional treated as an extra. The civilization of the Mayans, at their best, was about equal to that of the earlier Egyptians. Their colony was presumably founded at an early date in Egyptian history, at a time when the Egyptians, however, were most active and are known to have sought outside of their own country for copper, which they use for tools. All right. So you guys just heard it. Copper. Where's the richest copper? You already know that's in Michigan. They're saying Egyptians went outside and went to Michigan to get copper. Ancient Egyptians was here. Where's the truth now? What's up with the mounds? Come on. Hope you guys reading between the lines as I read. For those who've been following me for a while, especially. If you're new to my channel, make sure to catch up to all the previous presentations so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So these Egyptians, went outside of their country for copper, which they used for tools. From the internal evidence at present available, such as the type of religion, hieroglyphics, and architecture, the colony seems to have been founded during the so-called Old Empire and before the time of Khufu or Cheops. All right, before. All computations in the Mayan calendar are figured from a traditional date corresponding nearly to our 3400 BC. This also falls within the Old Empire. It may be the approximate date of some important event, such as the reign of King Many or the original discovery of America. Dodge the hijack. Again, they're seen in reverse, and ancient Egypt was here. They didn't come from nowhere. They were here. After about 500 years of great prosperity, Egyptian civilization experienced a severe setback, lasting several centuries, and communication with the colony in Yucatan, naturally always somewhat difficult and irregular, must have been abandoned. Several thousand years later, there remained only vague and conflicting traditions in both Europe and America, all right? And the conflicting tradition is that they put it over there when it was never over there. That's why everybody's confused now. Resemblance in religion. The Mayans, as well as the Egyptians, believed in a future life and in a place of punishment for the wicked. They both believed that various objects buried with the dead would be of use to them in the future life. They believed that food offered at shrines of the dead would reach the spirits. They used to make images of the deceased and carefully preserve them. Both the Mayans and Egyptians had a vague conception of a great god superior to the other gods. This great god was believed to have created 4 brothers, immense giants, who each held up a quarter of the sky. All right, so again, a little bit of generalizations on both sides, grouping a whole bunch of people as Mayans and a whole bunch of people as Egyptians, saying they all practice the same thing. It wasn't really like that. The Mayans called these gods Bakab, which is the Egyptian for spirits of the sky, literally gods of the bull. The individual names of these 4 gods, as recorded by the Egyptians about 3000 BC, were apparently not distinctly preserved by the Mayans through all the centuries until 1565 AD, when London noted them, except one, the god of the north, whose special color in Mayan was white, and who was called Ix, pronounced Ish, and Sak, meaning white. The Egyptian for white is Ubash and Sesh, from which Ish may be derived, and the Egyptian for snow is Sarku, which agrees very well with the Mayan Sak. The belief in the 4 Bakab, who hold the sky, impresses me as too peculiar and too characteristic to be independently developed on separate continents, merely by coincidence. Furthermore, the Egyptians themselves held other somewhat different beliefs concerning the sky at earlier and at later periods during their long history, so that this fact helps to determine the probable time of the establishment of the Mayan colony as during the Old Empire. Okay. And again, yes, it's not a coincidence because ancient Egyptians were in America. It's the same thing you're talking about. Mayan scholars knew the world is round. The sign of the month Hop, dedicated to the calendar and beginning the Mayan year, as it was recorded by Landa, is a crudely drawn spear with three smaller circles to one side. The spear is marked with the Mayan crisscross sign for Earth. Two of the smaller circles are each marked with a star, and the third with a tiny circle within the outer circle, the Egyptian signs for stars and sun. In the Mayan inscription on their monument, the month Pop is usually more simply indicated by a shutter with cross bars. This is the Egyptian hieroglyph for the letter P and also for the sky. All right, same thing. Now it says here a few examples of the similarity and language. It says here Mayan Indian, ancient Egyptians. And it says here Amiats, priests. Amias, the priest, same thing. Bobat, priest. Shrine, Abut, offering. Ahes, Ahekai, sorcerer. Ahau, king, all right. Ahua, planter. Awa, farmers. Akaul, enemy. Akui, enemies. Akim, to strike. And you guys see, you guys can pause it if you like and take a look and compare it for yourself. A lot of these literally mean the same thing, almost pronounced the same way, spelled the same way almost. This one right here, you got Ek. Remember, that was one of the so-called black gods of the Maya. An Egyptian, you got Nek and Ek, very black or black. It's almost the same. Ha, water. Wa, water. Wa, agua, wa, water. Same thing. Hai, rain. Ayu, rain. All right, that was, again, some of the comparisons right there. And then it says here, agreement of alphabets. It says Mayan, Egyptian, sound A, says bird, probable name A. And you guys can see, break this down on your own. I'll go slow so you guys can pause it and take a look at it yourself. All right. Very interesting, the comparisons they're doing. A lot of you probably know more than me when it comes to the glyphs here. This here, the alphabets. There are many cross-references possible between the alphabets. In Mayan, for example, Tasek, the fifth month, which is usually spelled by means of a snake's head, with a bowl beneath, is occasionally indicated by means of a snake's head, with 5 fingers just shown below. This is easily explained by the fact that one of the Egyptian signs for K is the palm of the hand. Sure enough, we find K often indicated in Mayan by a hand, even though Landa's alphabet does not give it. Conversely, the Mayan alphabet helps to understand the Egyptian. For some time, I have suspected that the 2 small sloping marks used for I in Egyptian represent rain or dew. This would make the name of the letter Iat and would explain the origin of the Greek name Iota in the Phoenician and Hebrew Yod. Sure enough, the Mayan sign for I is an arc representing the sky, with 2 drops coming down. And on further examination, it appears that the Mayans occasionally also use the Egyptian form of I, the 2 small sloping marks. The Mayans deliberately made reading difficult so as to keep knowledge secret. Archaeologists, by means of the day and month signs recorded by Landa in 1565, have ingeniously deciphered the dates of the inscriptions and the system of the calendar, but nothing more. No one has succeeded so far in reading any part of the text. I take particular pleasure, therefore, in providing the basis of a key to Mayan hieroglyphics by showing the phonetic letters are hidden in the inscriptions. The specimens quoted are some of the day and month signs and the letters of a few of those mentioned by Landa, with additional forms of T, I, K, M, N, O, and P. These 7 Mayan letter signs, among others, I discovered by their great resemblance to the Egyptian. All right. Conclusion. As it is based upon definite and verifiable evidence, my discovery of close communication between Egypt and Yucatan will presumably be generally accepted. My suggestion, however, that the Egyptians crossed the Atlantic about 3000 BC and established a colony in America is, of course, only a reasonable hypothesis, and many others may be urged as more tenable, all right? So I'm glad he said that, guys. You guys see, he's being honest. The part that they came over here across the Atlantic is a hypothesis, but the fact that they were in communication or dealing with each other, meaning they were from here, okay, that part he knows for sure. But it's conjecture to say they came from Africa. He's telling you that part is a hypothesis. It says here, number one, Egyptian and Mayan civilizations may have originated in Asia, may have, sometime before 5000 BC. Two tribes separating, one migrating to Egypt and the other making the long journey overland through Siberia and North America to Yucatan. All right, again, that's going with the whole out of Asia and Africa theories, and he's making a conjecture that they split. Again, he's talking about the same people. That's why he's finding all that here amongst the Mayas. Number two, some intermediate nation may have brought Egyptian civilization to America. May have. Again, he's guessing, but probably not the Phoenicians. Again, and the Phoenicians were from here as well, as they would presumably have introduced their own language, a simple alphabet of about 20 letters instead of the Egyptian language and complicated hieroglyphics. Number three, European civilization may possibly have originated in America, as suggested by Brasseur de Bourbourg and urged by Le Plongeon, though he was quite unable to prove this theory. And again, guys, we're going with number three. America is the true old world. You see, somebody else already had this knowledge, already had done the research themselves to be able to conclude that. Again, European civilization originated in America. Number four, all ancient culture may have spread from a large island in the Atlantic, subsequently submerged by the deluge and referred to as the Lost Atlantis, as contended by Ignatius Donnelly and others. Okay, are we talking about South America? You guys see that? However, if the fact of communication between Egypt and Yucatan is accepted, a direct crossing of the Atlantic by the Egyptians appears at present to be the most probable explanation, right, to him, because that's what he wants it to be true. But we already know ancient Egypt was here. They didn't have to cross it. They were already here. That's why the Mayas and all that have the same influence, same people, spreading the same culture going all over up and down the Americas. They've been seeing it in reverse this whole time, but we're doing the research, but we know better now. We know what the true old world is, and it was over here. And it says here Mayan hieroglyphics with key. And this is what he's showing. All right. It says here in Egyptian. All right. So he's comparing some of the glyphs, as you guys can see. So make sure if you guys want to pause this later on and take a look at yourself, you can go ahead and do that. And some more over here. Okay. Itzamna. And this is what is at the end of this book. All right, some more hieroglyphics. And that's basically the end of this book, guys. Again, that was Egyptian visits to America, some curious evidence discovered by O. Luites, all right? The only thing is, they're seeing it in reverse. The so-called Egyptians were here. Egypt is a Greek word. To marry is an America. More corroboration. America's a true old world. We're in this book right now. It's called Records of Ancient Races. In the Mississippi Valley, being an account of some of the pictographs, sculptured hieroglyphics, symbolic devices, emblems, and traditions of the prehistoric races of America, with some suggestions as to their origin by William McAdams. This is from 1887. Record of the ancient races of the Mississippi Valley. Right? Cover right here. And we're on page 53. This is chapter 13. It says here the water vessels always accompanying the food vessels in the mounds are very peculiar, and some of the types have a strong resemblance to the water vessels of Egypt. The following is a common form, and hundreds of this shape are to be seen among the collections of mound pottery from the valley of the Mississippi. These are of a capacity to hold from 1 pint to 4 or 5 quarts of liquid. It is quite easy to see that from making useful vessels, it would be natural to advance to the ornamental. Yet it is a little singular that ornamentation is almost every particular of the American mound pottery should be so exactly like that of Egypt and the East, just like Egypt, exactly like Egypt. Where's the real Egypt? The owl-headed vase in the illustration of the following page is almost exactly like one figured by Schliemann from Troy, in reference to the superiority of the skill displayed by the mound builders in the ceramic arts to the corresponding efforts of ancient Europe. We cannot do better than quote the words of Dr. Foster. In the plastic arts, the mound builders attained a perfection far in advance of any samples which have been found characteristic of the stone or even the Bronze Age of Europe, all right? It doesn't compare. We can readily conceive that in the advance of any metallic vessels, pottery would be employed as a substitute, and the potter's art would be held in the highest esteem. From useful forms, they advance to ornamental. Sir John Lubbock remarks that few of the British sepulchral urns belonging to ante-Roman times have any curved lines. Representations of animals and plants are almost entirely wanting. They are even absent from all the articles belonging to the Bronze Age in Switzerland, and I might say in Western Europe generally. But they were common in Greece and Egypt and East also in the Mississippi Valley. This is chapter 14, and it says here pictographs and hieroglyphic inscriptions on pottery. And it's going to mention about the cross symbol. It says here the mound builders' religion and belief in afterlife. Remember Graham Hancock? We're going to get that. He's going to remind us that they had the exact same belief, just like the Egyptians. And it says here the figure of the cross and the vessel, the cross of the Egyptians, the cross of the Chinese, all right? And here's an example from Mount on the Illinois. This one right here with the cross and circle. We're going to see that where that also exists, it actually sits in the hieroglyphic of the name of Egypt. Yes, in the Egyptian hieroglyphic, that's the same symbol. We start right here. It says in Europe, where it is ancient and common, perhaps it would be called a Greek cross. But the same figure is seen on the pyramids and was a hieroglyph in Egypt some thousands of years ago. We're talking about that cross symbol. In fact, according to Wilkinson, a figure almost exactly like the enclosed cross on this burial vase from a mound on the Illinois River makes a part of the hieroglyphic name of Egypt. You hear that? A glyph, an enclosed cross. This they found on a pottery and from a mound in the Illinois River. Part of the hieroglyphic name of Egypt is on that. In Illinois, in which it is repeated 4 times. And that says that's from Sir Gardner Wilkinson, Ancient Egyptians. And we got that book right here. That's The Ancient Egyptians by Sir Gardner Wilkinson in 1854. And we're on page 244 where it's said to go. And down here says the name of Egypt. You see the X and you see the symbol of the cross and the X crossed in the circle. Ow. We heard about the owl earlier. Continuing the book, it says, and the same reliable author, in speaking of sacred cakes of the ancient Egyptians, with which the sacred bulls consecrated to the service of their god Isis, Isin, we'll see Queen Mu Isin, Isis' little sister, is that what it means? Were fed, and upon which there was made the same sign of the cross. Says the cross cakes was their hieroglyphic for civilized land. That's what that cross, you see that? In the circle, he's saying in Egyptian meaning, it meant that was a symbol or the hieroglyph for civilized land. Wherever you saw this, that meant civilized land. So we know we were very civilized here with the mound societies, the mound builders, very civilized. The same figure of divided circle, however, occurs in the alphabet or figurative writing of the Chinese and has a similar significance, being their emblem for land or country. The explanation was given to me by most intelligent and educated Chinaman.
that the cross and the circle had the simple meaning among his people of partition, signifying that their land was divided into fields. In other words, not wild, but a civilized country. You see, agriculture, fields, corn. The figure of an enclosed cross occurs many times in the valley of the Mississippi. This figure is what found all over the Mississippi, in pottery, in the mounds, all over, in the walls. What does that mean? Civilized country, a civilized place. And we have seen it on the pottery, not only outlined by incision, but painted thereon in the peculiar mineral colors used by the mound builders. It is also seen in the carvings on the bluffs and in the caverns, as well as among the painted pictographs. It's all over the Americas and around the Mississippi. It occurs also inscribed on the ornaments of shell and other material used by this ancient people. And in a few instances, we have seen the same symbol on their implements of stone. And we're in chapter 15 real quick. I just want to show you this vase here. Eaten vessel with inscription in colored clay. This is from the Mississippi Valley. Right, the mound builders. You see the civilized country symbol. You see the symbol right here. We're going to see that's the name of Egypt. We just caught it in the other book. We're going to get it a little bit later again. Tamari has this symbol right here. And they're talking about that these ornaments must have a greater significance, a greater meaning other than just a little color, you know. So it explains a little bit here. This is the other symbols we see here. Found all over the vases in the Mississippi Valley, right? There's another example right here, vase from Mountain, Missouri, and a vase from a tomb in Thebes in Egypt, all right? It says here, Philemon dug up from the site of Ilium on the Trojan plain innumerable relics bearing such symbols. And Sir Gardner Wilkinson found them everywhere in ancient Egypt, all right? These same symbols that you find in here in Missouri, you see that? And it says the figure on the right is taken from Wilkinson's ancient Egyptians and was recovered from a tomb amid the ruins of ancient Thebes in Egypt. That we have taken scores of burial vases from the ancient mounds of Illinois and Missouri, almost exactly duplicating the most peculiar shapes of many from Egypt. Duplicates? Which one is the real one? Which one is the duplicate? Again, when the French were here, right? Supposedly French were the first ones to go into Egypt, revive Egypt and all that, ancient Egypt. Where were they really? They were here in Louisiana, weren't they? Louisiana Purchase, Mississippi, all that. All right, where were the French? Where were they really finding all these relics and stuff they got in these museums today? Are they really from Egypt? If they're so identical, who's going to be able to tell where it came from is my point. Right, they're telling you right here, duplicating many from Egypt. Would it in itself be remarkable, but that many of these should be ornamented in the same peculiar way and bear the same symbolic inscriptions is at least suggestive, all right? Not only are they made the same way, but they have the same ornaments as in ancient Egypt. So those really come from ancient Egypt, or they just grabbing them from the Mississippi and put them in the museums. All right, this is from the Library of Princeton. It says here, Theologic Seminary, Historia de la Nación Mexicana, or the History of the Mexican Nation, written by Mariano Cuevas. All right, so we came to the book ourselves. It says that he has doctors and honors in the University of La Habana. And he's the decano of the Mexican Academy of History. Individuo de número correspondiente de la Real Academia, so he's from the Royal Academy of Spain. He's a member of the Mexican Society and Geographic Society, I guess, and Statistics. And he's from the Estudios de la Ciudad de Mexico, the studies of the Mexican city of Mexico. Member of the corresponding American Historical Society of Worcester, all right, de la Sociedad Geográfica of Lima, the Geographical Society of Lima in Peru, and the Colombian Historical Society. All right, so this guy is very, very prominent. And what I want to emphasize, the very important thing about this is not even like a conspiracy, because they're not even thinking about it like that. They're not even thinking, oh, we're trying to, it just really looks like Osiris and Isis. They're like just really, the guy, when he wrote this, he's literally saying
that they found so many things that are so similar to Egyptians that they probably had to have come over here. Like he's literally saying this in this book, but there's no proof of that, right? We just know that Tamari, all that stuff, the true old world, that's over here. All right, so this is on page 14, Historia de la Nación Mexicana. Now look at this. They found these two statues. This is a very bad picture. They probably did this on purpose. This book got scanned very bad, but you know, I wish we had the original. And this is the writing inside. This is like a replica. This is from the side, A and B, and it says here, las célebres estatuas de Ajacutla, the famous statues of Acajutla. So this part that I highlighted right now. All right, I brought that to Google Translate. And I just want you guys to see what it says. It says one more step in this sense. That now the translation is not perfect, so you guys bear with me. But let's just go with it. It says one more step in this sense, a step that already cannot be disregarded to know Americanness. All right, they can't disregard this. Was the happy discovery of two statues a few years ago in August 1914 in a rustic property of the Exmo Archbishop of Saint Salvador, the Reverend Mr. Villoso, near the railway line in the port of Acajutla, all in the Mayan area. Professor Miguel Ángel González, doing certain excavations in order of the mentioned metropolitan, he found these two beautiful specimens that we reproduce in special illustration, and it is noted that previously many had been found like them. There was actually many like that. Who were despised and destroyed by ignorant indigenous people of the place. So people didn't really take care of them. In that same place, according to the historian, Central American Garcia Palaez, who later he was Archbishop of Guatemala, he existed in ancient times, a very large city and important area. So this is very translated. So he's saying that in very ancient times, there was a very large city and it was very important there. All right. So I just want to grab some more text. All right, so let's see what it says. All right, just bear with the translation. All right, so it says, be of the later, whatever the fact is, that statues, mostly the one that represents the mummy of a male, produces all printing to be known already similar to what Egyptian, but clearly Egyptian. It's not just similar, it's clearly Egyptian. He's letting you know it's clearly Egyptian. Even the hieroglyphs looks just like Egyptian. A second inspection, stopping in the locados in the attachment typical under the chin, and more that nothing in this inscription that both boost within the classic ellipsoid or cartridge on the central part of their bodies brings us out of the doubt. All right, there's no doubt. They're trying to describe, again, this is a translation, but you know, very bad translation. He's basically saying there's no doubt, man, this is clearly Egyptian. Already in the presence of the alphabetical series, the Modic, Rosette Stone, and Suede, the hieroglyphics of analogous ellipsoids reproduced in the two greatest works of Champollion, we will see that sign by sign, from figure 14, all the contents about the inscription of the male statue are also in the aforementioned classical monuments. Egyptians, it's all there, it's the same. He's literally telling you it's the same thing. This is crazy right here. This is like big. They hid this, they didn't even publicize this. This is not even mentioned. May check our assertions looking at the figures that we reproduced here and comparing them with two certainly Egyptian food exists in the Cairo Museum, right? On presence of these models, so they're showing the examples in the figure. If it gets tested, the existence of Bliss City, no one can anymore disregard the hypothesis about colonist Egyptians. All right, he's saying they might have been colonist Egyptians here. He's saying nobody can doubt it because this is so Egyptian what he's finding. He's confused. He's like, how did I find an Egyptian statue over here? Egyptians have had to have come over here, but no, this is Tamari. All right, Tamari. It says on pain of leaving unexplained a reality, the assumptions of Egyptian influence in our country have been bartered into probabilities on immigration, if not Egyptian, just from a people that was in cultural contact with the country of the pharaohs. He's saying if they're not Egyptian, they gotta have knew the Egyptians or something. They were in contact with them. Trade, all right, all connected, right? Colony, where's the real colony? Where's the epicenter? Right here in America, or so-called Atlantis, as the Masons call it, right? It's all Mason talk. But again, I just wanted to go back to the book. Again, I just wanted you to see, this is what I copied.
This is what it's translating. That's what's literally it's saying in the book. It's literally saying that here, guys. Sea de último lo que fuera, el hecho de que las estatuas, mayormente la que representa la momia de un varón, produce toda la impresión de ser no ya parecida a lo egipcio, sino netamente egipcia, not just apparently Egyptian, it's exactly Egyptian. He said, netamente, netamente. All right, I'm going to translate netamente to you guys. All right, netamente, netamente means clearly in English, clearly. Netamente, neta, purely, purely, entirely, entirely Egyptian, clearly Egyptian. Netamente, let's go back. Let's go back. Netamente, all right, netamente egipcia. You see it right here. So let's go back to the image. Here it is. Look at that. Osiris and Isis. And we've already done the corn video, right? Showing how Isis is really a corn deity. Corn mummified. There's corn coming out of Isis. It's the whole ritual of harvest and everything. New beginning. And Isis, the corn mother. All right. They got this from us. These are the corn deities.
We're waking up with analog, and there's nothing new under the sun. All right, we're going to read this article from North Carolina, 1839, from 1839. Nothing new under the sun. Only think, mummies found on this North American continent of ours. Mummies exactly like those of Egypt, all right? Again, are the Masons making it up when they're writing in their sacred books and teaching their initiates and all that? That this is the true the original Egypt? This is where you find the promised land, Atlantis? Are they lying? And then they're finding mummies and all this stuff around here that they never told you about. Christopher Columbus is not so great a hero after all. A bold navigator and all that, but it seems he was mistaken when he supposed he had found a new world. All right? Yeah, he was very mistaken. He knew where he was coming. He didn't never said that. He knew where he was going. He was sent over here. He met Indians in Ireland in the 1470s. He knew about the navigational stories of, he knew there was trade going on anciently back and forth. He knew this was Atlantis. He knew this was the promised land. Read the notice of Dr. Hawks' lecture below. He is a native of our state and does her honor. Dr. Hawks delivered his lecture on Wednesday evening on the antiquities of America to a crowded room at the Stuyvesant Institute and illustrated his remarks by transparent drawings prepared for the occasion. He first exhibited drawings of mounds, walls, etc., etc., in several parts of the western states, interesting only as exhibiting a link in the chain of testimony, and then proceeded to exhibit drawings representing ruins in Mexico and Central America. The audience listened with respectful attention. Some appeared to be quite interested, but there was an absence of all extraordinary surprise or enthusiasm. Not a man belonging to the Institute of France would have been able to have kept his seat, and having the evidences clearly placed before him, which at once overthrows and unsettles all the theories respecting the discovery of America, listen, and proves uncontestably that we are in the old world. All right, it's not me saying it. Listen to this. I can't make this up. Yo, waking up with analog. We cannot make this up. Once you see the overwhelming evidence, all right, that is placed before you, respecting the discovery of America, it proves uncontestably that we are the old world. I've been telling you, shout out to Drop Nation, and not in a country discovered but a few centuries ago. It goes further and throws a new light upon the Bible and prophecies, the only true historical record we have to guide us in such matters. It was impossible to look at the pyramids and the drawings of ruins in Central America, recently made by Mr. Walbeck, together with the glyph, the myriads of stone tortoises, the figures of Isis and Osiris, the palm leaf, the serpents, the heavy stone work, and the various basso relievos, without being satisfied that these were the works and labors of the very same architects who originally built Thebes and Memphis. All right, Memphis is right here in Tennessee. In our long, we hope to have a Champollion with us and the deciphering of the hieroglyphics and the true ancient history of this country. All right, the true ancient history of this in the Americas. All right, you guys hearing? Like everything we've learned on this channel, right? He's just confirming it. Once you really start deciphering the hieroglyphics and the true ancient history of this country will be made known. All right, Dr. Hawks deserves great credit for his laborious research and his lucid views on this subject. He is a pioneer of a great work. A new era is opening in the history of our country. A new era is opening right now, guys. It was supposed to happen in the 1800s. 1839, they wrote this. 1839, that's almost 200 years ago. Almost. He says a new era, and what happened? What happened? All of a sudden, everything's in Africa, right? But right now, a new era is opening in the history of our country, an era in which we shall have extraordinary developments of the past and wonderful events for the future. And I believe that right now. Let's make it happen. Because there's nothing new under the sun. So it's called Mysteries of Ancient South America by Harold T. Wilkins. Here, one may recall that the Jew prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah, now listen to this, located the ancient paradise in Garden of Eden in the north. But if the reader glances at a map, he will see that north of Brazil corresponds to that very Amenti land, or land of the dead. Amenti from Egypt, calls of Amenti Thoth, paradise of the ancient Egyptians. And the Celt, under another name of the Royal or High Atlantean Brazil, High Brazil. They're telling you north of Brazil, right? Which the people of the pharaohs said lay to the west of the Nile. Moreover, there was a man who was 12th king in the calendar of the Mayas, and whose country, Guatemala, was a Nile. You hear this? And whose country, what? Guatemala was a Nile, who corresponds closely with the Menes of ancient Egypt, who built the temple of Memphis and turned the course of the Nile of Egypt. All right, you hearing all this? Brazil, the old and mysterious, seems to be the ancient land, which was perhaps the cradle of the world's oldest civilization. Maybe 60,000 years ago, in a day when our own European ancestors were living in caves in then far warmer regions, what is now Pyrenean France, Cantabrian Spain, or Lacustrine Switzerland. All right, they're letting you know, this guy. What happened? That seems that Brazil seems to have the ancient land, which was perhaps the cradle of the world's oldest civilization, cradle of the world. When I was in Rio in 1938, I heard about a French engineer, Apollinaire Fraud, who had gone into the unknown region west of the Goyas Plateau to search for some very ancient gold mines. For half a century, Fraud had hunted these ancient mines, and in the course of his wanderings had stumbled on ancient rock inscriptions in Amazonas and the Mato Grosso woods, which to his amazement revealed the amazing fact that the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians, listen to this, what did he find in the Amazon, this guy? That the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were of South American origin. They were from South America and had left these petroglyphs as portalanos to the location of the ancient gold mines they worked, and which are now shrouded in dense bush and lianas, hunted by poisonous snakes, loathsome insects whose bite is pathogenic, and dangerous animals can. He's letting you know that the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were of South American origin. Alright, was the true old world. Now says Fraud had been exploring these wild woods of Brazil since he was a youth. It was in the province of Amazonas that he came on an ancient carved rock hidden by dense jungle close to a river, which recorded the journey of a proto-Egyptian priest to what is now Bolivia. The ancient inscriptions went on to speak of proto-Egyptian silver mines located in what is now the basin of Rio Madeira, south of the Madeira Falls. These portolanos in stone must be the oldest treasure shards known. Stage by stage, these portolanos and ancient stones ran across central Brazil, from some very ancient Proto-Egyptian port which must have been located between Bahia and Rio de Janeiro in the plateau of Goiás, on the edge of the mysterious wilderness which has never at any time been under sea or ice, and which today is known as the Roosevelt Tableland. Prot found one of these stones while he was running down an old Carthaginian trail. Alright, he's finding this all in Brazil. He's talking about Carthaginian trail, right? The clue of the hieroglyphics led him to a very ancient gold mine. Alright, so he found it like Indiana Jones following the clues. In the middle of a virgin forest too thick for him to penetrate. Indeed, many of these ancient Brazilian Bolivian gold mines today are buried in the middle of ancient woods. Prot says his inscription proved that the ancestors of the Egyptians, now listen to this, long before they passed to Africa and the Nile, had established an ancient South American empire ranging from what is now Bolivia to Bahia. So, wait a minute. Alright, this guy's letting you know, fraud. He found all this in the Amazon. And that he knows that this proves that the Egyptians, long before they passed to Africa and the Nile, had established an ancient South American empire, ranging from what is now Bolivia to Bahia. So while the treasure hunter is deeply engaged in trailing down caches of Proto-Egyptian gold bars and ingots in South America's jungles and foothills, he may by chance blunder on some enigmatical obelisk of unknown age, carved with hieroglyphics and covered with multicolored drawings and imperishable pigments such as Señor Julio Tello found near Trujillo, Peru in 1933. All right, so quickly I want to read from this newspaper article that I found. It was from it says here, the Kansas City Journal from Monday, October the 12th, 1896. And the title is Prehistoric Man, the Human Race and Its Dispersions. How long has the earth been peopled, and when and where was the beginning? All right, so we've been doing a lot of research, right? Correlating a lot of things that, America is the true old world. All right, more and more evidence is just going to keep coming out. We're just going to keep finding all these investigations, studies, articles, documented, recorded, historical chronicles, and information, right, that existed that never was taught to us. All right, so this is one of those. All right, so let's see what they have to say in this article. All right, because we are talking about, a lot of Egyptian resemblances here in America, and the truth is that this is the source, this is their origins, and that's why there is some resemblances here to all the old world civilizations. We have all that here. All right, it's not just like we're similar to Egyptians or we're similar to the Hindu or all that. It's everything, because this is the source. So from here it's spread out to the rest of the world. All right, so let's see what they say right here. All right, so I'm just going to belly flop to this part of the article, and it says, after correlating all data that have been made public to the present time, all right, the conclusion is unavoidable that the oldest civilization was in the Yucatan and Central America. All right, again, the Kansas City Journal in 1896 wrote this. They're telling you that if you really do the research and you start compiling all this information, all this evidence, it's unavoidable, all right, that the oldest civilization was in the Yucatan and Central America. Future discoveries may change this conclusion. It seems that Egypt was first peopled by immigrants from the Yucatan. Say what? It seems that Egypt was first peopled by the immigrants from Yucatan. Space will allow only a few facts that clearly indicate the truth of this assertion. First, the pyramids of Yucatan are some of them much larger than any found in Egypt. All right, much larger than any found in Egypt. That of Cheops not accepted. All right, and Giza. Second, the pyramids of Egypt bear structural evidence of having been modeled on those of Yucatan, notably of the one at Coloma, which covers 23 acres. Third, the early Egyptians and the Mayas of Yucatan had the same system of reckoning time, but the Mayas developed a system that was far superior. Again, we got that in the Foreign Quarterly Review, right? Far superior or excelled, in which antedates that of Egypt, is older than Egypt.
All right. Fourth, the Mayas manufactured cement that was of the same material as that of ancient Egypt. Fifth, the architecture of Yucatan is of the same general type as that of an ancient Egypt, but it is finer and seems to have been the model that the Egyptians attempted to imitate. They attempted to imitate our models from here, America. Six, the art of both countries, as displayed in their ceramics and architecture, is of the same type or school, that of Yucatan, being much more highly developed. All right. Again, this was an article written in the Kansas City Journal, Monday, October 12th, 1896. If you want to look it up, prehistoric man, they're telling you straight up in this article back in 1896 that we were the source, we were the cradle of civilization.
All right, we're going to continue here reading another article, this time from the Ancient American Magazine. This is Volume 1, Issue number 3, and this one's called Stones of Atlantis, all right? But again, these main articles we're going to get to in full-length videos because they're longer articles. We're going to come into this magazine right now to read specific articles for today's video. It says here, Ancient Egyptians of New Mexico, by Barbara Holly Rock. In April 1991, my colleagues and I first viewed the inscription carved on gray limestone atop a narrow valley with about a 1,000-foot drop to the valley floor. The view from the site was immense. We could see both north up the narrowed valley for several miles and south down to the open plain horizon. Access to this site is up the west side of the mountain trail cut by wagon tracks, then across the mountaintop by foot to a narrow ledge facing west. A month later, other members returned to take infrared photographs of the inscription and to make a plastic mold. The inscription is precisely drafted with evenly spaced characters on visible straight lines. The salutation, on, is left and above the three-line message. The right of the bottom line is another complex character which I will refer to as the signature. Another complex symbol is below the three lines. Since we were then affiliated with Fell's Epigraphic Society, I asked for opinions to the origin and date of the inscription. 3 opinions were offered concerning only its national origin: Hmong, Western Ojibwas, Indian, and Demotic Egyptian. None were offered for the translation or possible date. So real quick, this is some of the inscription right here. You guys can see. All right, just a photograph. Let me just go back to the article. It says, Gloria Farley gave us a copy of the article, Egyptian and Homunculus to a Western American petroglyph group. By the late Dr. Paul Cheeseman and David Tomlinson, we learned that the inscription made of 19 different symbols had 10 matches to those shown by Cheeseman and Tomlinson. Therefore, there was 55% probability that our inscription may have the same language base as the Hmong inscriptions. But what was the Hmong's language base? The Western Ojibwa's origin of the inscription was researched and discarded because the Ojibwas originated around the Great Lakes area of Canada, making it doubtful that they were ever ranged from Southern California through the mountains eastward into New Mexico and Colorado. They practiced intermarriage not only with all their neighboring Indian tribes, but also with other races, French trappers, all right? With the who? With the Huguenots? With the French, yeah, Black French. Therefore, their language would be a borrowed mixture from many sources. The Ojibwas, symbols and meanings from William Tompkins' Indian Sign Language made gibberish when applied to our three-line inscription. Since 25% of our petroglyphic symbols were mentioned in Tompkins' book, I discarded this as a national origin source. The third opinion, Demotic Egyptian, has been the best suggestion to determine a meaning and to point to a relevant national source. All of our symbols, 100% of them, were found in the Egyptian language sources that we consulted, okay? This is Egyptian hieroglyphics they're finding here in New Mexico. But then they break down what hieroglyphic writing is here and what time periods and what demotic means and from what Egyptian kingdom it comes from. He says demotic writing originated in northern Egypt and it was used by Herodotus and other Greeks for writing daily documents. So this is what they're finding here, okay? They're giving you the time frame of this possible Egyptian inscription here in New Mexico. Again, things they never tell us. Here they are right here. And you guys can do the comparison on your own. But yeah, this is a supposed translation, right? Greetings, hail integrity, village, time to live, as signposts of death by last inundation had broken the authority from crescent moon to crescent moon for a month, to be in front of or lead a return to cut the clouds above, at the end time to live. Offerings and sacrifices are the way one's love. Seems like sign about a flood and survival. All the sacred mysteries among the Mayas and the Quiches 11,500 years ago. Their relation to the sacred mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, and India. It says here Freemasonry in times anterior to the Temple of Solomon. Notwithstanding such rebuffs, I made up my mind to present to American readers some of the historical facts that have been brought to light by deciphering the bas-reliefs and mural inscriptions by means of the ancient hieratic Maya alphabet discovered by me. Alright, and check this out. This is a big one right here. Let me just show you this one. Alright, so you got on one side it says, on the left, it says ancient Maya hieratic alphabet according to mural inscriptions. And to the right is Egyptian hieratic alphabet according to Messrs. Champollion Lejeune de Brunsen. Alright? So they're talking about, at least the Egyptian ones, they're verified from primary sources that they're using at that time. And this is what he's finding and what they're finding in the Americas on the left. And you can see the resemblances, right? Alright, so yeah, it has a lot of similar, you see the symbols here, and the letter that it associates to, supposedly. Alright, are we just talking about the ancient pictograph? So again, the Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18, and this was written in 1837. These facts being admitted or established, the question is, do the monuments of New Spain, as displayed in the illustrations of the works under review, correspond with three unvarying and identifying characteristics? Our reply is yes, they correspond entirely. Some of the pyramids, as we have said, are larger than those of Egypt. Some of them are different in their model, having somewhat of an Indian character, bearing strong affinity to pyramidal temples still extant in Japan. And it says, see the works of Sir Thomas Raffles for that. The Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singular identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Okay, so again, the Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singularly identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Belus Jupiter, Bel, Tower of Babel, described by Herodotus, and which by many scholars has been considered to be the scriptural Tower of Babel. Right? It consists of the 8 graduated square towers, each rising above the other, and terminating in a topmost sanctuary, dedicated apparently to the same solar god, but there are more singular analogies between the forms of some of the pyramids of New Spain and some of the most ancient pyramids of Egypt.
I don't think you even knew existed. It goes against everything Manifest Destiny teaches about Native Americans. And I want you to know this part of our history because people erased it. And we'll get to that later on in the program. Erased it intentionally. Erased it intentionally. That's an important part of it.
Most Americans have no idea that ancient cities with advanced architectures once dotted the ancient North American landscape. Director Kennedy has since coined a name for such places.
What I call hidden cities. I use the term because these were very big places. There were more people, we now know, in Cahokia, across from St. Louis, than there were in London or Rome.
For more than 50 years, evidence of humans in America much older than 13,400 years ago was simply dismissed, and anybody who attempted to go that way would not get research funding and would be ostracized by their colleagues and literally have their lives ruined. And this is most unfortunate, and it's not how science should proceed, because we now know that human beings have been in the Americas for tens of thousands of years before 13,400 years ago. In fact, the latest evidence puts them back more than 130,000 years in the Americas. And what that says to me is, if they were saying before that humans didn't come until 13,400 years ago and nobody should look, nobody should dig deeper, now we know they were there 130,000 years ago. That's more than 100,000 years of the American story that has not been told entirely because of the dogmatism of archaeology. And now reluctantly they're having to accept, all of the institutions are accepting, well, we're sorry, we got it wrong. But it's not just a matter of getting it wrong. It's a grave responsibility to be the profession that interprets the prehistory of humanity to the modern world. And it's a betrayal of that responsibility to be so dogmatic and to refuse to consider any possibility which doesn't fit with one's preconceived notions. And, you know, the net result is that we're left with 100,000 years of North American prehistory, which has been completely unstudied, and they're only now beginning to study it. And the evidence that's coming out, both in North America and South America, is absolutely stunning.
I want you to take a look at this. This is going to blow your mind. See this here? First, let me show you the Great Pyramid of Giza. You've seen this? One side of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you measure it, it is from the bottom to the apex, 606 feet. That's important. That's an ancient unit of measurement. It's referred to as the stade. Now I want to show you this. These are the Newark earthworks. They're here in Ohio. Yes, Ohio. The earthworks are made, they're structures that are made now of earth that it has been built up from the ground in a perfect circle. Here it is, a perfect circle and a perfect octagon. But they were built by the ancient Hopewell civilization. They date back from 300 BC to 400 AD. So let's look at these structures here. Bring this up. I want to show you something. If you square the inside of the octagon, here's a square and here's a square. If you square it, this is what surveyors do when they're measuring. They square the circle, and then they divide that area into 4 equal parts, or cubes, and then you find that each cube is made up of 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606. It's made up of stades, exactly the same. Now, if that's not interesting enough,
Of this, it says here, extinct races, remarkable discoveries of buried cities in the Republic of Mexico, August 2nd. Explorers in the state of Chiapas confirmed the reported remarkable discoveries of archaeological matter. Roads built by prehistoric inhabitants were found, and the ruins of cities with an estimated total population of 30 million were discovered. The houses are of a pyramidal form of architecture and indicate a high degree of scientific attainment. The carved male and female figures dug up are plainly of Egyptian style, all right? The locality was undoubtedly densely populated. It was densely populated. Egyptian, so-called Egyptian style. This is the original, okay? This is where the style originated. They copied us. 30 million inhabitants, these prehistoric roads. It's all being found today with their LiDAR technology. They're finding all this stuff that was reported in the 1800s today with their LiDAR technology in the forest.
Now we're going to take a look at this book, these writings. The book is called The Mound Builders, Their Works and Relics by Stephen D. Peet, PhD. It says member of an antiquarian society, the American Antiquarian Society, American Oriental Society, fellow of American Association of Advanced Sciences, member of Victoria Institute, also of Société de Ethnographie, core member of Numismatic Society of New York, Historical Societies of Virginia, Wisconsin, Rhode Island, Davenport, Academy of Sciences, also editor of American Antiquarian and Oriental Journal. All right, so, this guy don't play. All right, now it says here, right, this is chapter 1, right? I just wanted to point this out right away, what they're letting you know. Remember his credentials, right? It says the mound builders, Chapter 1, right? The mysterious races. The mysterious, you're mysterious. My story. My story, not his story, right? Now you're mysterious because it's your story. America is called the New World, and so it is, for it is newly discovered. Hmm. Our claim, however, is that America is also an old world, all right? It's also not an old world, it is the true old world. It is the old world, not also an old world. Dodge the hijack, ain't nothing over there on that other side old. It's recent and compares well with other countries in this respect. All right, letting you know right away in chapter 1, right? The mound builders, right? The guy, you saw his credentials, all the societies he's a part of. He's letting you know straight up that, yo, don't get it confused. Don't get it confused. America's also an old world and it compares well with other countries. He's talking about Egypt, Babylon, Iraq, all those places. All those places. China, India, or Hindustan, right? As it was called. They compares very well. We invite our readers into the field of American antiquities and will call attention to the prehistoric tokens and remains which are so numerous. So numerous, so many prehistoric tokens here and remains. We are all well assured that there are many things which will interest them, and that much may be learned from the study of American archaeology. It says the number of these ancient villages is well calculated to excite surprise. 10,000 burial mounds or tombs were found in the single state of Ohio, just in Ohio. All right, what are we talking about? Mounds, just in Ohio. Just in Ohio, I'm telling you. There's a lot of origin stories coming out of Ohio. A lot of tribes originated there or came out of there. All right. We're going to dig into that. All right. So 10,000 burial mounds or tombs are found in Ohio and also 1,000 or 1,500 enclosures in the same state. Nor is their magnitude less a matter of surprise than their number. All right. Their magnitude. It's not even just that there's a lot of them, it's their magnitude too, how they were built. 20 miles of embankment constitute one series of works. 20 miles of embankment? 20 miles. Can you even picture that? Can you picture building a mound like a wall like for 20 miles long? That's a lot of work. All right. Walls sometimes 30 feet in height. Walls sometimes 30 feet in height and enclosing from 50 to 400 acres. Surrounding their fortifications. All right. Man, huge walls, right? They used to build huge 30 feet high in the man, 20 mile embankments and 30 feet walls. All right. These are not savages, enclosing from 50 to 400 acres, surrounding their fortifications. Pyramids, 100 feet in height, pyramids 100 feet in height, covering 16 acres of ground. 16 acres of pyramids. All right, 16 acres of pyramids. All right, we're reading a primary source here. All right, divided into wide terraces, 300 feet long and 50 feet wide, varying with the pyramids of Egypt. All right, vying. All right, so he said vying with the pyramids of Egypt. So what does vying mean? We're in the Cambridge Dictionary, and it says it's the present particle of vie, V-I-E. So let's go to that. All right, so it says vie, right? To compete with other people to achieve or get something. To achieve, you compete. They compete with the pyramids of Egypt. All right, they compete with the pyramids of Egypt. All right, vying with the pyramids of Egypt. Form the foundations for their great houses. All right, mounds form their lookout stations, 60 and 90 feet in height. The variety of their works was great, and their distribution widespread. In one part of this wide domain, there were game drives, in which the animals hunted were erected in effigy. In another part were garden beds, covering hundreds of acres, and presenting many curious patterns. In another, large groups and lines of burial mounds. In another, many circles and fort rings. In another, lodge circles and hut rings. In another, village circles and dance rings, interspersed with temple platforms. You hear all this? You hear all this building and engineering. All right, how there was these layouts, how they had these whole towns and cities, metropolises. All right, in this area, the Mississippi Valley, and all around these mountains. So it's not just that you find one little mountain here; it's like a whole complex, town, city. Like how they were building everything. In another extensive enclosures with domiciliary platforms, and another groups of pyramids, and another groups of pyramids interspersed with fish ponds, surrounded by earth walls, fish ponds that were growing fish around their pyramids. You hear this? Surrounded by earth walls. Everywhere was manifest a wonderful adaptation of the works to the soil and scenery and physical surroundings. Can you imagine just seeing that? All right, so now we're in this book, all right? It's called Queen Mu, right? And the Egyptian Sphinx by Augustus Le Plongeon, MD. All right, now the Maya, they call their country Mayak. That is the land first emerged from the bottom of the deep, the country of the Shud. And the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, boasted that their ancestors in the lands of the West, all right, were the oldest men on earth. All right, quote Herodotus. Go research that. If the opinion of Leo Humphrey and a host of modern geologists regarding the priority of America's antiquity be correct, what right have we to gainsay the assertion of the Mayas and of the Egyptians in claiming likewise priority for their people and their country? Now it says here, in ages long lost in the abyss of time, when Aryan colonists had not yet established their first settlements on the banks of the river Saraswati in the Punjab, and the primitive Egyptian settlers in the valley of the Nile did not fancy, all right, so they're telling you before any Hindu people or any, people in Hindustan or anybody in the valley of the Nile or right there or the other side of Egypt or any Egyptian, wherever Egypt was, they're saying that there was nobody there. There was not a fancy. Even their most hopeful daydreams that their descendants would become the great people whose civilization was to be the cradle of that of Europe. There existed on the western continent a nation, the Maya, that had attained to a high degree of culture in arts and sciences, all right? So before they could even daydream, all right? Before them, before the Hindus, before the Egyptians, there existed on the western continent the Mayas. Like the English of today, the Mayas sent colonists all over the earth, all right? The Mayas colonized the earth, okay? Again, the Mayas colonized the earth, including Africa. These carried with them the language, traditions, the architecture, astronomy, cosmogony, and other sciences, in a word, the civilization of their mother country. Brought civilization. All right? It is this civilization that furnishes us with the means of ascertaining the role played by them in the universal history of the world. The history of the world. We find vestiges of it and of their language in all historical nations of antiquity in Asia, Africa, and Europe. Speaking the mother tongue they brought from over here, because the mother tongue is from over here. It is easy to follow their tracks across the Pacific to India. It's very easy. By the imprint of their hands dipped in a red liquid and pressed against the walls of temples and caves and other places looked upon as sacred, to implore the benison of the gods, also by their name, Maya, given to the banana tree, symbol of their country, the banana tree, all right, that's from here, whose broad leaves is yet a token of hospitality among the natives of the islands, then along the shores of the Indian Ocean and those of the Persian Gulf to the mouth of the Euphrates, up that river to Babylon, then renowned city of the sun, then across the Syrian desert to the valley of the Nile, where they finally settled and gave the name of their mother country to a district of Nubia, calling it Mayu or Maio. Mayu or Maio. Alright, after becoming firmly established in Egypt, they sent colonists to Syria. These reached as far north as Mount Taurus, founding on their way settlements along the coast of the Mediterranean in Sudan, Tyre, the valley of the Orontes, and again on the banks of the Euphrates to the north of Babylon and Mesopotamia. All right.
We're in this book real quick. It says views of ancient monuments in Central America, Chiapas, and Yucatan by F. Catherwood Arch. It says here the Mexican temples were called teocalli. They're talking about the pyramids, the teocallis, or houses of God. Remember that Memphis, Egypt, Aegyptus means house of Ptah or house of Ptah or temple of Ptah, right? House of God. Same thing. And the Mexican temples were called teocallis, houses of God, and were very numerous. There were several hundreds in each of the principal cities, several hundreds, many of them doubtless very humble edifices. They were solid masses of earth, brick, or stone, and in their forms somewhat resembled the pyramidal structures of ancient Egypt. And we continue, says here, at Ocosingo. Ocosingo is actually an archaeological site. It's a pyramid, Ocosingo pyramid. I'm gonna show you how complex, how big it is, how massive this construction is. It says, at Ocosingo, we met with the arch before alluded to, with the usual accompaniments of mounds and terraces, and an ornament over one of the doorways, not unlike the winged globe of Egypt. Just like the winged globe of Egypt in the archway, the same symbol found in Ocosingo. All right, so first of all, what is the winged globe of Egypt, right? The globe and the wing, right? We see that in the doorways and a lot of these so-called temples or pyramids, right, in Egypt, right? The globe and the wings. Now, Ocosingo, right? Ocosingo. Let me show you how complex this is, all right? Hold up, all right? This is Ocosingo right here. Ocosingo, this whole thing is one structure, one big pyramid. Let me show you. All right, Ocosingo. It's very big. Ocosingo. That's probably one of their ball courts and ceremonial places. Yeah, Ocosingo is huge. I'm gonna get like a diagram for you guys. All right, that here's another one. Ocosingo is huge. It's one big complex. So he's saying they found a globe, a winged globe in one of the archways, just like in ancient Egypt. In this site right here that we never heard of. How big it is. Look at that. That's one big monument right here, all the way from the bottom. Probably, I think actually from this over here, all of it stone, brick, all the way to the top. It doesn't start right here. This whole thing is together. That's just one complex. Aside from it, up in front of it is other buildings. All right, here's a good one. It says picture of Tonina Mayan ruins and archaeological site right here. Ocosingo pyramid. You see the whole thing, this whole thing, even in the bottom, it's all brick, it's all stone, masonry, all the way to the top. It's very complex. All right, Ocosingo. Very complex. See, from the top, probably you can see all that. Look at this place, beautiful, right? Ocosingo, where they found a winged globe, an Egyptian winged globe. So here's some of the what's found on the walls, some of the art. Yeah, you know, it's pretty big, it's pretty massive, you know. Doesn't compare to things in Africa. There's some of the parts and you know, some of the parts, and look at all these different rooms and stuff. Another view of it right here. It's massive.
From the scholarly journal, the Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18, published in London in 1837. The first and strongest conviction which will flash on the mind of every ripe antiquarian while surveying the long series of Mexican and Toltecan monuments preserved in the various works to which we have briefly called attention is the similarity which the ancient monuments of New Spain bear to the monumental records of ancient Egypt. Again, so their main purpose to writing this article, to doing this work, all right, is to show you, right, to show the antiquarian or somebody who likes history, who actually researches these things, is to call to the attention the similarity which these ancient monuments of New Spain, right, Mexico, bear to the monumental records of ancient Egypt, all right? Similarity. Where is the true old world? While surveying them, the glance falls with familiar recognition on similar graduated pyramids, on similar marks of the same primeval Ophite worship, on vestiges of the same triune and solar deity, on planispheres and temples, which, though characterized by some distinctions entirely American, are not less worthy of the notice of the Egyptian antiquarian, on relics again of palaces, at once noble in their architecture and beautiful in their proportions and decorations, on monuments sepulchral, domestic, religious, or warlike, which deserve the designation of Cyclopean as much as any that are now extant in Italy or Greece. Now we can, try to guess what they mean by Cyclopean, but he's going to mention how these giants, right? We know Cyclops, right? Those giants with the one eye. So we just gotta have an open mind with all this stuff and what do they really mean. And we gotta dodge the hijack always. But there's a lot of info here that we've already been surfing the wave, the past videos and all the other videos you can find on YouTube regarding this subject. And we can have a little bit. We have a little bit of background to be able to discern what we're about to read. All right, so let's continue. On idols and sculptures, some of rude and some of finished workmanship, exhibiting different eras of civilization, and often presenting the most striking analogy in posture and gesture to the monumental style of sculpture and of statuary preeminent called Egyptian. Lastly, the eye of the antiquarian cannot fail to be both attracted and fixed by evidences of the existence of two great branches of the hieroglyphical language, both having striking affinities with the Egyptian, and yet distinguished from it by characteristics perfectly American. One is the picture writing peculiar to the Mexicans, in which displays several striking traits of assimilation to the anaglyphs in the historical tablets of the Egyptian temples. A brief enumeration of a few facts will show upon what slight foundation Dr. Robertson must have built his careless appreciation of the monuments of New Spain. A mania existed in his time, as it does now, in favor of the stupendous importance of everything connected with the Egyptian monuments. Now, what is the simple fact? Pyramids, not inferior to Egyptian, exist in many parts of Mexican territories and of New Spain. And we can include, all over the Americas. Thousands of pyramids all over all the continents of the Americas. All right. Some of these pyramids are of larger base than the Egyptian, and composed of equally permanent materials or greater materials. We know UB2 News, shout out to him for putting out that video showing us how it was all concrete. King Drop also showed that it was all like the so-called Roman material or temples, right? It's not megalithic like in the Americas. Vestiges of noble architecture and sculpture are visible at Cholula, Otumba, Oaxaca, Mitlan, and Tlaxcola. The mountain of Texcoca or Texcosa is nearly covered with ruins of ancient buildings. The ancient town of Palenque exhibits not only excellent workmanship in the temples, palaces, private houses, and baths, but a boldness of design in the architect, as well as skill in the execution, which will not shrink from a comparison with the works of at least the earlier ages of Egyptian power. So the earlier ages, right? Ancient Egypt, right? The first dynasties. Because ancient Egypt was in America. In the sanctuaries of Palenque are found sculptured representations of idols, which resembled the most ancient gods of Egypt and Syria. Again, in the sanctuaries of Palenque are found sculptured representations of idols, which resembled the most ancient gods of Egypt and of Syria. Palinspheres and zodiacs exist, zodiacs, which exhibit a superior astronomical and chronological system to that which was possessed by the Egyptians. A superior, again, superior astronomical and chronological system to that which was possessed by the Egyptians. Let's not forget, this is from Harvard University.
And we continue waking up with analog. Mummies in Tennessee, Georgia, 1892. They were found in a cave and are similar to those of Egypt. Again, they were found in a cave. We're talking about Tennessee, right? We're talking about mummies being found in Tennessee, similar to those of Egypt. That is Egypt, Little Egypt. That is Tamari. Chattanooga, December 2nd, two prominent citizens of London County, Tennessee, while hunting in the mountains, discovered a cave containing well-preserved mummies, similar in every respect to those of Egypt, and a large trunk or case bound with brass, sealed in several places. Upon being opened, it was found to contain several leather cases, also sealed. The largest was open, and a roll of parchment found covered with Hebrew characters, Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew, Phoenician, that's what they call so-called Phoenician, Hebrew, Paleo. The relics were deposited in the vault of the First National Bank of London. All right, you see, they had it. And the Smithsonian Institution notified. Oh, no wonder we didn't find out about this, because they notified the Smithsonian Institute. And you know what they do, guys? They just hide everything. Reverend Dr. Tucker, pastor of the Presbyterian Church, translated one of the manuscripts and finds it to have been written by Menkata, high priest of the land of Kem. Do you guys hear that? Who wrote it? Menkata. He signed it. Where was Menkata living then? He was in Tennessee in ancient times. He wasn't over there. It was written by Menkata, the high priest of the land of Kem. All right? It was over here in Tennessee. Who is Menkata? All right? Menkata, mummy of Menkata, high priest of Egypt, found in Tennessee. Menkata. He was a pharaoh of the 4th dynasty during the Old Kingdom who was well known under his Hellenized names, Miskerinos, Herodotus, and Mekeres. By Manetho, according to Manetho, he was the throne successor of King Bikeres, but according to archaeological evidence, he was almost certainly the successor of Khafre. Africanus from Sincellus reports as rulers of the 4th dynasty, Soros, Sufis the first, Sufis the second, Mekeres. All right, that's him right there, they're saying. Menkaure became famous for his tomb, the Pyramid of Menkaure. At Giza, his statue triads. All right, Tutash the hijack. So this is a statue of him, supposedly. Did they steal this from America? Or did they just make a replica? Did they just make a replica? Did they bring this from over here? We on to you. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? Let's continue reading. It says, it contains reference to hidden treasures, which the writer says will be needed for a great war. The story is stranger than writer Haggard's most visionary efforts. All right, they found mummies. That's probably Menkaure himself. They found mummies in Tennessee, just like the Egyptian ones, the same exact way. They're not telling you different. So why would you assume? Why are you going to conjecture that all that happened over there only? We know Tamari, the beloved land, that's right here. The Nile is the Mississippi. Correlating with exactly what the Masons said, right? What did the Masons say? That this is the original Egypt. All right? This is just more proof right here with the newspaper article.
Called Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids by Peter Tompkins, author of Secret of the Great Pyramid. All right, so I'm on page 116 of this book. I just wanted to zoom into this table right here, this chart. Just wanted to show you real quick. All right. It says Maya and Egyptian. All right, they're comparing the hieroglyphics. All right, so see that? Very similar, right? Some cases, this one, here, right here. All right, so you understand.
who's the real Nagas. And we got it in the past videos, who civilized who, right? We're just gonna get more correlation in this video. All right, it says a later comparison between Mayan and Egyptian alphabets. Brasseur complained that no serious archaeological work was being done in the Americas, that it was foolish to try to write world history, leaving out one half the world. All right, how could they try to write world history when they only writing about the other side of the world, when we got all these advanced civilizations over here on the other half of the world, right? So it was so foolish to try to write world history, leaving out one half of the world, the Americas. He believed the Carians of Central America to have been the oldest known civilization. The oldest. He's talking about in the world, not just in the Americas. An industrious and commercial people who could handle metal and precious stones. Great sailors and astronomers who had traveled the world colonizing Atlantis. They colonized it. This is Atlantis. This is that center. This is the origin. And they also colonized what? The Mediterranean and ancient Egypt. Who civilized who? Whose astronomy, physics, and religious practices were similar, including a strong cult of Sirius, the dog star, and deification of the crocodile, from all which Brasseur concluded that either Egypt had been a Central American colony or vice versa. And the truth is that it was just a colony of Atlantis, so-called Atlantis, America, or Central American colony. We're in this book now. It's called Myths and Symbols, or Aboriginal Religions in America by Stephen D. Peat, PhD. It's part of Prehistoric America, Volume 5, actually. Says Stephen is a member of the American Antiquarian Society, New England Historical and Genealogical Society, correspondent member of the American Oriental Society, Numismatic Society, New York, Victoria Institute, Society of Biblical Archaeology, also editor of American Antiquarian and Oriental Journal. This is from 1905. The most remarkable fact which is brought out by this study is that the Aboriginal religions of America correspond to the earliest forms of religions which prevailed in the lands of the East. The system of sun worship which prevailed among the agricultural tribes of the Gulf states closely resembled in that which existed in Egypt. Very closely resembled exactly, how it was in Egypt and Babylonia at the opening of history. And many of the same customs were observed. Many of the same customs were observed. All right, in ancient America and in just like in Babylon and Egypt. Really. They continue on page 125 of this book. It says here animal worship and sun worship. All right, so that's how they interpret, Tosh the hijack. So they're going to be talking about this stele, this image right here, this glyph. This is actually a priest. They're calling him a priest. Now they're going to be talking about, now they're going to say a tiger skin, right? We know that in America, this is a jaguar. This is a jaguar skin. We're going to talk about that. Something significant about that. All right, so take a good look at him, you see? Smoking it up or even speaking, who knows? But we're going to keep going. It says here, the picture is suggestive. It is not certain whether the form represents the god Tlaloc or his priest. For priests were frequently clothed with the same kind of garments on their person and had in their faces the same symbols that the god himself did. It will be noticed that the figure has a tiger skin resting upon his shoulders. It's not a tiger skin, it's a jaguar. This was in Egypt, the official dress of the priests of the sun. Same thing in Egypt. This is how the Egyptian priests dressed. With the jaguar, where they were really ancient America. That's an American thing. So in Egypt, they did the same thing. The priests, and the fashion seems to have prevailed in America. It seems to have prevailed in America just like in Egypt, right? We're on page 132 of this book, and it's going to correlate with something we just read, all right? This is a different source, all right? It says the winged globe, all right? The winged globe is another symbol which shows a system of progression. The winged globe in Egypt was a symbol of the sun. The winged globe is found in America. The winged globe is also found in America. In Tamari, the winged globe. Remember, they found the winged globe
in Ocosingo, that pyramid structure I just showed you. In Egypt, the winged orb was a symbol of the kingly office and was frequently placed over the head of the king. The winged orb is a modification of the disc. The overshadowing wings are found in Egypt and Assyria and India and in America. In all these countries, there is a circle or a globe with wings issuing from it, and generally some animal head is connected with the circle. In Egypt, the asp issues from the circle. In Assyria, the head of an eagle is seen above the circle and the tail. In America, the head and wings of a eagle are sometimes seen hovering over the circles, as we have described above. On page 137, he says here, there's another symbol in America which is quite important because of its resemblance to those common in Egypt and Babylonia, and especially because of its connection with sun worship. We refer to the animal-headed throne, 3 specimens of which have been found in Central America, 1 at Chichen and 2 at Palenque. We're on page 161 of this book, and right here has a great drawing or picture or drawing of the pyramid of Cholula, very old one. All right, you see how it looks like a mountain, but that's actual pyramid, one of the biggest in the world. All right, gonna get the video right now to show you, but that says here, the size of the pyramid is to be considered. A comparison has been drawn between the pyramids of America and of Egypt. It has been said that the pyramid of Cahokia and of Cholula are fully equal to those of Giza. The Cahokia, both of those are bigger than Giza. All right, they're bigger. And of Mycerinus. We must, however, distinguish between the horizontal extension of a natural or artificial heap of earth and the elaborate layers of stone, and grant to the Egyptians the more elaborate structures, right? So he's going to go with them, but it says Cahokia covers 12 acres, but was only 90 feet high, and it is uncertain whether it was natural or artificial. Oh, you still debating it? No, it's artificial. It was built by people, yes. It's a mound. It's bigger. Cholula is larger at the base than any one of the old world pyramids, larger than any of the old world pyramids. Cholula, larger, over twice as large as that of Cheops, but only slightly higher than that of Mycerinus, all right? But we got the tallest and El Mirador, La Tanta Pyramid in Guatemala. That is the tallest structure in the world, all right? I'm going to show you that. It may seem strange that the mounds and earthworks of the Mississippi Valley should be compared to the pyramids of Egypt, and yet we are convinced that many of the elements of grandeur were embodied in both classes of structures. All right, page 190, they're talking about some water vases. Again, they're taken out of some tombs. It says here, he says, it is very interesting to learn that figures very much like these are among the oldest of symbolic forms known. We have taken scores of burial vases from the mounds of Illinois, almost exactly duplicating the most peculiar shapes of many from Egypt, almost exactly duplicating the most peculiar shapes of many from Egypt.
Foreign Quarterly Review. At Mitlan, there exists the remains of a palace which is of considerable extent. Its architecture, though distinguished by characteristics peculiarly American and different from that of any nation with which we are familiar, is to our view marked by features of stately grandeur and melancholy beauty. The roof of the portico is supported by plain cylindrical columns. It is curious that the ground plan of this palace is the Egyptian Tau. Again, it is curious that the ground plan of this palace is the Egyptian Tau. All right? Vases agreeing both in shape and ornament with the earliest specimens of Egyptian and Etruscan pottery have been found in their sepulchral excavations. Moreover, evidences of an amount of civilization and of social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boosted monuments of Egypt are furnished by the architectural memorials of this great, singular, and almost unknown people. They're talking about you. Again, this guy's just saying, there's evidences of amount of civilization and social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boasted monuments of Egypt. It just shows basically what he's saying. You're just seeing pyramids, but you're not seeing the whole town, the whole city, the aqueducts. Where's everything else? You can find that in Mexico. They just found 60,000 structures in the jungles of Guatemala. Well, they just released the information to us. Who knows how long ago they know about it? 60,000 structures, right? With this was a metropolis. It basically rewriting history. Millions of people lived there. Clean streets, aqueducts, highways, fortified, monuments. All right? Dig into it. Roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them. Like I just said, all these ancient ruins are all connected by roads and highways in the middle of the jungle. That's what they're realizing today, this year. They're letting us know. And this book is from 1836, this article. Why didn't they teach us this in school? Who knows? We might have become archaeologists. We might have had an interest to dig into this stuff, to our own history, knowing that it was greater than Egypt and vast and magnificent and grandeur. We would have probably been the archaeologists discovering and writing about this today. All right, but we weren't given that chance. They told us everything was over there and that side over there. You want to be an archaeologist? You want to study history? You got to go over there to study in Oxford. Then you got to go to Egypt. Then everywhere else but here. Right? Again, roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them. Artificially constructed like the Roman military roads of large squared blocks of stone. Where is all this in the so-called old world and the other side in Egypt? Where is all this? High science, high civilization. Among the pyramids on the plain of Saqqara is one consisting of 4 graduated steps. The illustrations of the Antiquities Mexicanas furnish a copy of the Mexican pyramid of exactly the same form and nearly the same dimensions. So again, which one is the duplicate? They try to tell us that this is that these Aztec and Mayan temples are a lot sooner, that they are not as old as the Egyptian pyramids, but we're crushing all this illusion, all this hijack, chronology-wise, history-wise, right? So again, the illustrations of the Antiquities Mexicanas, and that's the book I told you, this 9-volume book by Lord Kingsborough. It's available online. Just Google it. Says it furnishes a copy of the Mexican pyramid of exactly the same form and nearly the same dimensions as the one in Egypt, in the plain of Saqqara. I look it up. Again, descending galleries at a particular astronomical angle of declination lead to central chambers, either for the purpose of mystery or sepulture, in the Mexican pyramids as well as the Egyptian. Quite enough has been said to prove the architectural identity. It is fair to infer that tribes of the same architectural family built both. Okay, again, it is fair to infer that tribes of the same architectural family built both. In that case, they would be contemporaneous, but the evidences of the same affinity or identity multiply as we proceed. So he just said that means they would be living or of the same time at least. Okay, so he didn't say Egypt is older. He's saying this is basically concluding that they were at least around the same time because they have the same kind of technology, structures, architecture, language, the hieroglyphic system, everything. All right, so but we know this is older over here. All right, so because remember, his hijack from what he thinks is the truth is that the old world's on that side. So his perspective and orientation is different than ours.
All right, we got here a news report coming out of, again, San Diego, ruins of San Diego. It says here, ruins of an ancient California city. Antiquaries will feel deeply interested in the discovery of vast regions of ancient ruins near San Diego, and within a day's march of the Pacific Ocean, at the head of the Gulf of California, or the ancient Red Sea, right? The Red Sea. Portions of temples, dwellings, lofty stone pyramids, 7 of these within a mile square, and massive granite rings or circular walls, round venerable trees, columns, and blocks of hieroglyphics all speak of some ancient race of men, now forever gone, their history actually unknown to any of the existing families of mankind. In some points, these ruins resemble the recently discovered cities of Palenque, near the Atlantic or Mexican Gulf coast. In others, the ruins of ancient Egypt, all right? Just like the ruins of ancient Egypt. In others, again, the monuments of Phoenicia, or like the monuments of Phoenicia. This is what they're finding here, right? And yet, in many features, they differ from all that I have referred to, but still they have their uniqueness. I observed that the discoverers deemed them to be antediluvian before the flood, while the present Indians have a tradition of a great civilized nation, which their ferocious forefathers utterly destroyed. The region of the ruins is called by the Indians the Valley of Mystery. Wilworth's Chronicle. All right, so we're in this book. It's called Ancient America and Notes on American Archaeology by John D. Baldwin, author of Prehistoric Nations. This is from 1872. We're on page 159. It says here, the oldest of civilizations. Some investigators who have given much study to the antiquities, traditions, old books, and probable geological history of Mexico and Central America. All right, so very important. Those who have investigated, those people who have given much study, those who actually do research of the antiquities and the actual traditions and actually research in these old books and probable geological history of Mexico and Central America believe that the first civilization the world ever saw appeared in this part of ancient America. All right, the first civilization of the world. They're not just talking about the Americas, they're talking about the very first civilization. Those investigators who have actually taken the time to study, given much study to these people, to this part of the world, believe and know that this is where the first civilization first ever appeared. Right, in this part of ancient America, says, or was immediately connected with it. They hold that the human race first rose to civilized life in America. All right, first civilized life in America. That's the cradle of all, in America. Okay, in ancient America, which is geologically the oldest of the continents. I remember, geologically meaning the land is the oldest out of the primordial waters. It's the oldest. They found it. The most renowned geologist, Louis Agassiz, told us. The Mayas, isn't their story? They tell us they came out of the bottom of the sea, their land, Mayak. And it's proven geologically. There's a part in Canada, one of the oldest parts in the world that came out of the water. That's what they're saying according to their science. And that ages ago, the portion of this continent on which the first civilizers appeared was sunk beneath the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so they're saying something happened. Usually the engulfing of this portion of the land is supposed to have been affected by some tremendous convulsion of nature, and there is appeal to recollections of such a catastrophe, said to have been preserved in the old books of Central America. And it is. We've talked over this. And also in those of Egypt, from which Solon received an account of the lost Atlantis. Now, according to this hypothesis, the American continent formerly extended from Mexico, Central America, and New Granada far into the Atlantic Ocean, toward Europe and Africa, covering all the space now occupied by the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and the West India Islands.
So they're saying that America extended that far. You hear what they're telling you, right? So it was still part of America. And going far beyond them toward the east and northeast, this lost portion, all right, this lost portion of America, remember, it's just an extension of America. This lost portion of the continent was the Atlantis, of which the old annals of Egypt told so much in the time of Solon. They're letting you know this is the actual place they were calling Atlantis. It was just an extension, a lost portion of America. These are the same stories of the old annals of Egypt that Plato told us. And it was the original seat of the first human civilization, the original seat. Just like the Egyptians said that the ancestors, their ancient ancestors, were from a western distant land where the first the people of the earth came about, which after the great cataclysm was renewed and perpetuated in the region where we now trace the mysterious remains of ancient cities. Those desiring to know what can be said in support of this view of ancient America must read the later volumes of Brasseur de Bourbourg, especially his Quatre Lettres sur le Mexique and his Sources de la Historia Primitive du Mexique. So we're going to get this book, we're going to get the full translation, even if we have to translate it from French. I got the actual books. These are in the archives, and we're able to be able to see these books. Continuing on page 184, it says here, it was an original civilization. It has been said, very justly by one explorer of the Mexican and Central American ruins, that the American monuments are different from those of any other known people of a new order, and entirely and absolutely anonymous. They stand alone. The more we study them, the more we find it necessary to believe that the civilization they represent was originated in America, and probably in a region where they are found. It did not come from the old world. They didn't come from that side of the world, that hemisphere. It was the work of some remarkably gifted branch of the race found on the southern part of this continent when it was discovered in 1492. Undoubtedly, it was very old. It was very old. They're talking about the civilizations of America. Its original beginning may have been as old as Egypt. It may have been as old as Egypt, or even farther back in the past, or even before Egypt. Then the ages to which Atlantis must be referred. And it may have been later than the beginning of Egypt. All right? Who can certainly tell its age? Who's going to tell the age? They don't know. Whether earlier or later, it was original. Whether later, oh, well, we'll discuss that later. No, we're going to discuss that now. It's earlier, and it is original. Its construction seems to have been a refined and artistic development of a style of building different from that of any other people, which began with ruder forms, but in all periods of its history preserved the same general conception. They show us the idea of the mound builders wrought out in stone and embellished by art. The decorations and the writings also are wholly original. There is no imitation of the work of any people ever known in Asia, Africa, or Europe. It appears evident that the method of building seen in the great ruins began with the ruder forms of mound work and became what we find it by gradual development as the advancing civilization supplied new ideas and gave higher skill, but the culture and the work were wholly original, wholly American. All right, so he's giving a hint that it seems that it started out all with first creating the mounds, right? Creating mounds, and then these mounds became stone buildings.
a pre-Columbian canine breed from Mesoamerica, dating back to over 3,500 years ago. This is one of the many native dog breeds in the Americas, and it is often confused with the Peruvian hairless dog. The dog Xolitzcuintli references Xololt because this dog's mission was to accompany the souls of the dead in their journey into eternity. So we're in this book. It's called The Aztec Empire. The spirit of the dog had the task of transporting its master spirit to the underworld after death. Again, the task of the dog, right, in ancient Aztec mythology, religion, was to guide and transport its master spirit to the underworld after death. Shalot, one of the deities described in the Codex Borgia, says here, all right, says, was the god with associations to both lightning and death. He was associated with the sunset and would guard the sun as it traveled through the underworld every night. Dogs were associated with Shalot. This deity and a dog were believed to lead the soul on its journey to the underworld. Ancient Egypt Online. Anubis is one of the most iconic gods of ancient Egypt. Anubis is the Greek version of his name. The ancient Egyptians knew him as Ampu or Impu. Anubis was an extremely ancient deity whose name appears in the oldest mastabas of the Old Kingdom and the pyramid text as a guardian and protector of the dead. Alright, just like Shalot. Alright, we're talking about ancient Egypt, we're talking about America. He was originally a god of the underworld, but became associated specifically with the embalming process and funeral rites. Again, this deity and a dog were believed to lead the soul on its journey to the underworld. Again, Shalot, right? We related him to Anubis, says he is believed to lead the soul on its journey to the underworld. Like many ancient Egyptian deities, Anubis assumed different roles in various contexts, depicted as protector of graves as early as the first dynasty, 3100 BC. Anubis was also embalmer by the Middle Kingdom, was replaced by Osiris in his role as Lord of the Underworld. Alright, Osiris slash aka, man, these are all epithets of Thoth, and we know Anubis is Hermanubis. We're going to get into that. It's basically Thoth. Hermes is Thoth. One of his prominent roles was a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. Again, archaeological evidence has been found in the tombs of Colima, Mayan, Toltec, Zapotec, and Aztec Native Americans, dating the breed to over 3,500 years ago. Long regarded as guardians and protectors, the indigenous peoples believed that the Xolo would safeguard the home from evil spirits as well as intruders. In ancient times, the Xolos were often sacrificed and then buried with their owners to act as a guide to the soul on its journey to the underworld. Guide of souls. By the late Pharaonic era, 664 BC to 332 BC, Anubis was often depicted as guiding individuals across the threshold from the world of the living to the afterlife. Again, Anubis was often depicted as guiding individuals across the threshold from the world of the living to the afterlife. Xolos were considered sacred dogs by the Aztecs, Toltecs, Maya, and other groups. They were also useful companion animals. According to Aztec mythology, the god Xolotl made the Xolitzcuintli from a silver of the bone of life from which all mankind was made. Xolotl gave this gift to man, with the instruction to guard it with his life. In exchange, it would guide man through the dangers of Mictlan, the world of death, toward the evening star in the heavens. Xolitzcuintli is of course a breed of dog here in Mexico, often shortened to Xolo. These beautiful, often black, hairless, and therefore flealess dogs were almost extinct, but connected efforts to rescue it have been successful. It is believed to be one of the world's oldest and rarest breeds, dating to 3,000 to 7,000 years. 3,000 to 7,000 years. If I'm talking about ancient Egypt, I'm talking about America. All right, people? In pre-Hispanic times, they were considered sacred with healing properties both for the body and the soul. In Ptolemaic period, when Egypt became a Hellenistic kingdom ruled by Greek pharaohs, Anubis was merged with the Greek god Hermes, or Thoth, right? Hermes is Thoth, becoming Hermanubis. So I told you Anubis is Thoth, the underworld. Thoth is an epithet. He created all these epithets. He's the jackal. He's the hijack. The two gods were considered similar because they both guided souls to the afterlife. Perfectpets.com. It says here, Xolitzcuintle. Info and Xolitzcuintle breeder. The treasure of Mexico, national dog of Mexico, is known as the Xolitzcuintle. Other names it may be known worldwide as include Xolitzcuintli, Xolitzquintle, Mexican hairless, and Tepitzcuintli. The Xolitzcuintle is an ancient breed. Archaeologists have found evidence of the breed's existence in the ruins of pre-Columbian societies of Mexico, all right? Pre-Columbian, Central and South America. Omelet.us, Mexican hairless dog, all right? It says here, history. The Mexican hairless dog in English is called Xoloitzcuintle in its native Mexico, or Xolo for short. They come in three sizes: miniature, intermediate, and standard. Origins date back more than 3,000 years, and the dogs were seen as companions and hunters of small prey, but more importantly, were a gift from the Aztec gods to help people transfer to the afterlife. In Egypt's early dynastic period, Anubis was portrayed in a full animal form with a jackal head and body. He attended the weighing scale during the weighing of the heart, in which it was determined whether a soul would be allowed to enter the realm of the dead. The oldest known textual mention of Anubis is in the pyramid text of the Old Kingdom, 2600 BC to 2100, where he is associated with the burial of the pharaoh. Burial, Anubis, the dog, the black dog, the Shalol, burial with the pharaoh. In the Old Kingdom, Anubis was the most important god of the dead. He was replaced in that role of Osiris during the Middle Kingdom. In the Roman era, which started with 30 BC, tombs depict him holding the hand of deceased persons to guide them to Osiris. Xolotl accompanied Quetzalcoatl to Mictlan, the land of the dead, or the underworld, to retrieve the bones from those who inhabited the previous world. Nahui Alt. DODogs.website. All right, it's a standard Mexican hairless. All right, here we go. All right, here you go. Look at that. It says how this hairless breed arrived in Mexico will remain a mystery. It's native to Mexico, all right? This is the true old world. The other name of this breed is Xolitzcuintli, or short for Xolo. Xolo is one of the world's oldest and rarest breeds, dating back over 3,000 years. Artifacts and clay pottery of this ancient breed have been found in the tombs of Colima, Mayan, and Aztec Indians. People believed that this dog would safeguard the home from evil spirits as well as intruders, right? The Spaniards. In ancient times, it was often sacrificed and then buried with their owners to act as a guide to the soul on its journey to the underworld. Again, Anubis, we found you. And again, Anubis. One of his prominent roles was a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. During pre-Inca and Inca times, it is believed that the dogs were revered animals. All right, they were revered animals, just like the Mayas and the Aztecs, just like the Egyptians had Anubis, that were thought to have mystical qualities and were even dressed in ceremonial clothing on special occasions. That's why you see Anubis all dressed up all the time, right? They did put clothes on their dogs, these ancient people. A common belief across Mesoamerican region is that a dog carries the newly deceased across a body of water in the afterlife. As in many other cultures, earlier and later, the dog was seen as a kind of intermediary between worlds who could act as a guide. This is most clearly seen in the image of the dog god Anubis. The dog who aided and guided one in life would serve the same purpose in the afterlife, again, just like in Mexico. The intimate relationship between dogs and their masters in Egypt is made clear through the inscription in tombs, monuments, and temples, and through Egyptian literature. Dogs, unlike cats, were always named, and these names were inscribed on their collars. Xolos served as companions to the Aztecs in this life and also in the afterlife. As many dog remains and dog sculptures have been found in Aztec burials, including some at the main temple in Tenochtitlan. Indeed, dogs were familiar and loved by the Egyptians. This devotion is clear from the number of times they are depicted and referenced in art and inscriptions throughout the history of the civilization, and the way they were generally treated. As already noted, dogs were depicted on palettes in the pre-dynastic and early dynastic periods. During the Old Kingdom, the dog of King Khufu, 2589 BC, Taj the Hijack, Akbaru, was said to have been buried in the king's tomb with him. One of the best known dogs of Egypt was given his own funeral stele in this same era. Abuitiyu was the dog of a servant of the king, though which Old Kingdom monarchs is unclear, who was honored with a burial fit for a noble. Ancient origins. Xolotl, the underworld god of the Aztec. Xolotl plays an important role in the Aztec belief system, and he appears in several myths. The Mexican hairless dog is sleek with a muscular chest. All right. When looking at it, one is struck by its similarities with the jackal-headed Egyptian god Anubis. Xolotl and Anubis share another similarity. They are both associated with the activities occurring between death and the arrival of the afterlife. Whichever one that might be, they are not necessarily lords of the underworld themselves, but they certainly have associations with the darker side of things. Anubis was the protector of tombs, unlike actual jackals. Cemeteries tend to be associated with dogman sightings. Anubis is also the one who weighs the heart after a person is deceased. The heart is weighed against the feather of mad meaning truth. Is this the reason dogman witnesses so often describe the creature, gaze appearing to read their souls? The peculiar similarities between the two deities will lead you to believe that they have the same origin. What that could be, I do not know. Perhaps they originated on Atlantis, if ever existed, and you know it did. Thoth is from Atlantis. Indigenous peoples of Mexico had Xolo dogs as home and hunting companions, and today they are still very popular companion dogs. They are also the national dog of Mexico. Their value in ancient native cultures is evidenced by their frequent appearance in art and artifacts, just like Anubis and the dog depictions in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Clay dog statues have been found ritualistically placed in the tombs of Aztecs, Mayans, and Colima Indians, as have the skeletons of actual dogs. Sort of reminds you of Anubis, the Egyptian dog god, lord of the underworld, doesn't it? They are both black, guide the dead, and have pointy stand-up ears. Ancient history encyclopedia says here, according to ancient Egypt, even so, just as with the mourning of the death of a human being, it was believed that one would meet one's canine friend again in the afterlife. The Aztec people believed that when they died, the Xolo guided them to Mictlan, their land of the dead. Many were buried with a Xolo. Dogs appear in underworld scenes painted on Maya pottery, dating to Classic period and even earlier than this in the pre-Classic. Tomb paintings of the pharaoh Tutankhamun show him in his chariot with his hunting dogs, and Ramesses the Great is depicted similarly. As in the case of Khufu and his companion, dogs were often buried with their masters in order to accompany them closely in the afterlife. Some dogs seem to have been killed after the death of their master and then mummified, while others died earlier, and still others at a Cynopolis and perhaps at Saqqara were ritually sacrificed. So, burials across Mesoamerica have been found with ornaments or statues of dogs, and some cultures even sacrifice dogs to be buried with their owners. The people of Chupiquaro buried dogs with the dead. In the Great Classic period metropolis of Teotihuacan, 14 human bodies were deposited in a cave, most of them children, together with their bodies of the 3 dogs to guide them on their path to the underworld. Protectors of tombs. In contrast to real wolves, Anubis was a protector of graves and cemeteries. Protector. Several epithets attached to his name in Egyptian texts and inscriptions referred to that role. Maya burials from the Classic period are frequently found with associated animal remains, often dogs. For example, in the ruins of the classic Maya city of Caminal Juju in Guatemala, a dog was found interred with a sitting skeleton, along with a grave goods offered to the deceased. The frequent finds of dog skeletons in classic Maya burials confirms the belief that dogs guided the souls of the departed on their journey into the underworld already existed at this time. The Incas kept them as companions and they were prized by Inca royalty as bed warmers. Bed warmers. Again, here in Rover.com says the dog people says Xolo origins, the amazing story behind Mexico's ancient dog breed. Says the American Kennel Club calls the Xoloitzcuintli the first dog of the Americas because it was one of the earliest dogs to be domesticated by human populations and has existed in Mexico for more than 3,000 years. According to the Xoloitzcuintli Club of America, archaeologists have discovered clay and ceramic statues of dogs nearly identical to the current-day Xolo in the tombs of the Mayan, Colima, and Aztec Indians. Now let's include their ancient Egypt. These ancient tribes revered the dogs for their supposed healing qualities and snuggled up with them at night for warmth. We just read that about the Inca royalty doing that with their dog. Same thing. All right, I'm going to read to you from this article. It's called The Symbolic Meaning of the Dog in Ancient Mexico by Herman Bayer. The source of this would be the American Anthropologist News Series, Volume 10, Number 3, from July to September 1908. All right, page 419 to 422. When the ancient inhabitants of Anahuac, or ancient Mexico, Mesoamerica, burned a corpse, they killed a red dog and laid it beside the dead body. The town of Hardai was the cold center of Anubis, and so was called Sinopolis, city of the dog, by the Greeks. Here dogs freely roamed through Anubis' temple and were also bred for sacrifice. Mummified dogs were brought to the temple as offerings to Anubis, the red dog identified with the pharaoh breed being preferred, the red dog. Again, just like the Mayas, the red dog, red fur dog, sacrifice, right? Red dog. Here we go again. When the ancient inhabitants of Anahuac, or ancient Mexico, Mesoamerica, burned a corpse, they killed a red dog and laid it beside the dead body. It says here that mummified dogs were brought to the temple as offering to Anubis, the red dog identified with the pharaoh breed being preferred. When the ancient inhabitants of Anahuac, or ancient Mexico, Mesoamerica, burned a corpse, they killed a red dog and laid it beside the dead body. In addition, they made the deceased take along a small dog with reddish fur, and around its neck they put a loose cotton cord. They said that the deceased swam on top of the dog when they passed through the one river in hell called Chicona Huapan. Anubis was one of the deities that could also work against humans. He was independent, sometimes helpful, but sometimes punished humans as well. One of his main roles was the guardian of the scales. This was related to the beliefs that after death a person meets the gods who put his or her heart on a special scale. The scenes of the weighing of the heart ceremony from the Book of the Dead present Anubis, who measured if the person was worthy enough to live an eternal life. Thus Anubis could decide the soul's fate. Anubis was one of the most frequently represented gods in the ancient Egyptian art. In the early dynastic period, he was depicted in animal form as a black wolf. Dodge the hijack with wolf. We know it's the Xolotl of Mexico. We're going to see, all right, it's clear. Anubis' distinctive black color did not represent the coat of real wolves. You hear how they're trying to throw you off? Because they're depicting, we find this depiction of a black dog all over the hieroglyphs. So they're saying it's not because of his coat, because there is none like this in Egypt. And it doesn't look like the wolf they're talking about. So they're trying to play it off right here. They're saying Anubis' distinctive black color did not represent the coat of real wolves, but it had several symbolic meanings. Yeah, of course, it has symbolic meanings. That's why they named them. That's why the Mayas and Aztecs grabbed Xolotl, right, and made him the god on the underworld because of his black coat. Regarding the Xochitlintle, so again, the Mexican dog, right? It says most hairless dogs are black or bluish gray color. Xolos come in 3 different sizes: toy, miniature, and standard, and they weigh between 4 to 20 kilos. They're mostly black or bluish gray in color. Again, they're mostly black or bluish gray in color. Who's also black, always depicted? Anubis. The god Anubis was usually depicted as a jackal and sometimes as a man, but he was always in black. Again, the god Anubis was usually depicted as a jackal and sometimes as a man, but he was always in black. He ain't brown. which was a color connected with desolation and rebirth. Archaeologists have identified Anubis, sacred animal, as an Egyptian canid, the African golden wolf. So they're saying that Anubis, right? This depiction that you see in the hieroglyphics all the time with the black head, black, right? Jackal-looking kind of dog, says that it is basically identified as the sacred animal, the African golden wolf. Now look at this animal. So this is the African golden wolf. Does this look anything like Anubis? Does this look anything like Anubis? This is a jackal, right? Coyote, fox, whatever you want to call him. But definitely not Anubis. Anubis was depicted in black. Again, Anubis was depicted in black, a color that symbolized both rebirth and the discoloration of the corpse after embalming. So that's what they say, why he is depicted in black. But the reality is because they're depicting the Xolotl, the Mexican dog. We're going to show you in the Peruvian Inca orchid. This is the Mexican Xolotl dog. You see this? The Mexican, the Peruvian Inca orchid dog from America. Doesn't exist in Egypt. Anubis. In modern times, the Chinantecs and Mixes of Oaxaca believe that the black dog will help the newly dead to cross a body of water, either a river or a sea, to the land of the dead. The Huitzilan believe that a dog carries the dead across the water to reach the underworld, home of the devil. So here, ancient Egyptian mythology, the afterlife. One of the most intriguing tales of ancient Egypt is the one of the afterlife. Laid out step by step in the Book of the Dead, the pharaoh must embark on an amazing journey to attain his ultimate goal of becoming the sun god Ra. Alright, so dodge the hijack here, but it says right in the beginning, the journey begins. Before a pharaoh could face the trials of the 12 great halls, he first had to secure passage in the form of a boat that would carry him down the river of the underworld. So he has to get on a boat, right? That has to carry him down the river to get to the underworld. On a river, on a boat. They thought that 4 years after the death, this dog had to carry the soul over Chikuna Nua Hapang, the ninefold stream, right? The river, just like Anubis, right? And the river, when you die, he transports you on a raft, on a boat that flows around the innermost hell, the final abode of the dead. Regarding rivers again, it says here the Book of Gates by E.A. Wallace Bush, 1905. It says the Book of Gates is an ancient Egyptian cosmological treatise describing the architecture and inhabitants of the Tuat or Duat, the underworld, which the boat of the sun god Ra traversed during the night hours. So a boat through a river, just like the Xolotl. You have to cross a river in the underworld in the Mayan and Aztec mythology, right? With Xolotl, the dog carrying him on the back on the river. In the book Christ in Egypt, the Horus Jesus Connection by D.M. Murdoch, having quitted the boat of the river of Hades, you hear? Now you see again, a river in a boat. The deceased is met by the god Anubis, who? Xolotl, right? In the river, the same as the Mexican deity, Xolotl, in the underworld, in a river. So again, it says here, the deceased is met by the god Anubis next to the river of Hades, who conducts him in safety through the devious windings of intricate labyrinths and leaves him at the threshold of the judgment of Hall of Osiris, the Hall of the Two Truths. So you see, Xolotl carries Quetzalcoatl on his back, or the deceased, the lost souls on his back, and transports them to the rest of the journey. Dogs were often victims of ritual sacrifice so that they could accompany their masters on his voyage through Mictlan, or the underworld. Their main duty was to help their owners cross a deep river. Again, their main duty, Xolotl, right? Their main duty, Xolotl, right? This dog that looks like Anubis, their main duty was to help their owners cross a deep river, and it is possible that dog sculptures also found in burials were also intended to help people on this journey. They thought that 4 years after the death, this dog had to carry the soul over Chikuna Nua Hapang, the ninefold stream, right? The river, just like Anubis, right? And the river, when you die, he transports you on a raft, on a boat that flows around the innermost hell, the final abode of the dead. You can see that Anubis does the same thing here. In the judgment hall, if the deceased is not sufficiently pure, he is changed into a pig and reconveyed to earth by Anubis in a boat. Again, to get to Mitatecutli, again, this is the underworld of the Maya and the Aztec, the traveler's soul should go a long way. The 4-day journey between the crumbling mountains and through the deserts under the icy wind, fleeing from snakes and crocodiles. Then on the shore, again on the shore of the underground river, the deceased met the conductor, right, or the ferryman, right? Conductor, ferryman, in the form of a small dog with ruby eyes, again Anubis as the ferryman. On her back she was carrying the soul into the possession of Mitatecutli, in which we also find reference to the celestial ferryman. Moreover, as the opener of the road, it was the duty of Anubis to guide the boat of the sun through the underworld during the hours of darkness, just like Sholot guided the sun, right? We already read that. You see the correlation here, right? And you see that you're going to read a lot about the celestial ferryman in the ancient Egyptian afterlife mythology and religion. And so that is Anubis, the same thing, all right, on the river, just like Sholot. All right, so we have Sholot, right, the god that supposedly the Sholot Quetzalcoatl is named after. All right, so again, it's a deity, an Aztec deity, right, a dog-headed Aztec deity, right? In his ancient Egyptian religion, usually a canine or a man with a canine head. To the Aztecs, the association between dogs and death was embodied in the form of Sholot, the god of fire, lightning, deformities, and death. Sholot was often depicted as a human skeleton with the head of a dog, but any symbol of a dog could represent the fearsome deity. In ancient Mexico, man's best friend was a loyal companion, even after death. Now, this mythical personage, Sholot, is generally represented with a dog's head, sometimes even as an entire dog. The Mexicans had a certain species of dogs called Xolo Itzcuntli. The Zapotec named them Peco Xolo. All this shows that Xolot, who carries the sun, has been conceived as a parallel to guide and carrier of the human soul, the dog. All right, you guys hearing this? This is all Anubis. This is ancient Egypt Anubis. All right, this is the origin right here, the true old world.
Thanks for tuning in. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.